did SpongeBob's voice go from sounding like this
I'm ready!
to sounding like this?
I'm waiting.
Well, it turns out it's the same voice actor who's been playing SpongeBob for over 25 years, and you probably didn't even notice the gradual change. So today, we're going through the entire evolution of SpongeBob's voice and finding out why Tom Kenny sounds so different now. But before we continue the video, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Now, let's get started. How did SpongeBob's voice go from sounding like this cheerful, natural, high-pitched laugh to this more strained, falsetto version we hear today? Well, here's the crazy part. It's been the same voice actor this entire time. Tom Kenny has been voicing SpongeBob SquarePants for over 25 years, and you probably didn't even notice how gradually his voice has changed. So, today, we're diving deep into the evolution of one of the most iconic voices in animation and discovering why SpongeBob doesn't quite sound like he used to. Before we talk about how SpongeBob's voice changed, we need to understand how it was created in the first place. Back in the late 1990s, Tom Kenny was already an established voice actor and comedian. Growing up in East Syracuse, New York, Kenny was actually quite shy as a kid. He's mentioned in interviews that people assume he must have been the class clown, but he was actually more like the class clown's writer. Too shy to perform, but always coming up with funny ideas. Kenny turned to stand-up comedy as a teenager, testing his humor in nightclubs around Boston and San Francisco. This eventually led to appearances on late-night shows and cable comedy programs throughout the 1980s and 90s. His big break in voice acting came when he was performing at the Improv one night, and a representative from Cartoon Network happened to be in the audience. The rep was impressed by Kenny's ability to showcase multiple characters and asked if he'd ever considered voice acting for animation. He'd been doing stand-up comedy for years and had worked on shows like Rocko's Modern Life, where he voiced Heifer the Cow. But it was during his time on Rocko's that something truly magical happened that would change animation history. In an episode called Dear John, Kenny voiced a minor character, a female alligator named Al. This character only appeared briefly, but creator Steven Hillenburg was in the room that day as the creative director of Rocko's Modern Life. When Hillenburg later started developing his own show about a sea sponge, he remembered that specific voice. Kenny had actually forgotten exactly how he'd perform that character, so Hillenburg had to play him a clip of that old episode to remind him exactly how Al sounded. Kind of like a munchkin, but not quite. Kind of like a kid, but not in a Charlie Brown's Child's Voice way. This description perfectly captures what made SpongeBob so special. He had the enthusiasm of a child, but the responsibilities of an adult. The voice needed to be innocent and optimistic, but not so childish that adult viewers couldn't connect with it. When SpongeBob SquarePants premiered on May 1st, 1999, Tom Kenny was 37 years old and had complete control over his vocal range. If you listen to episodes from seasons 1 through 3, there's something distinctly natural about SpongeBob's voice. Yes, it was high-pitched, but it didn't sound forced or strained. It was genuinely cheerful and optimistic, matching the character's personality perfectly. During this period, the entire cast would record together in the same room, old radio show style. Kenny has mentioned how this collaborative environment helped create the show's special feel. When all the actors are responding to each other in real time, the performances feel more natural and energetic. Wednesday was recording day, and this schedule remained consistent from the very beginning. The creative team was also stable during this time. Steven Hillenburg was the showrunner, Derek Dryman was the creative director, and they both sat in on recording sessions to direct the actors. This consistency and leadership meant that SpongeBob's voice remained consistent too. Kenny knew exactly what Hillenburg wanted from the character, and the direction was clear. If you go back and listen to classic SpongeBob episodes like Help Wanted, Sleepy Time, or Band Geeks, you'll hear what many fans consider the definitive SpongeBob voice. It's enthusiastic without being manic, childlike without being annoying, and most importantly, it sounds effortless. Remember in Chocolate with Nuts when SpongeBob yells, "Chocolate!" with such genuine excitement? That natural enthusiasm is what made his voice so memorable. It never felt forced or artificial. Or think about Pizza Delivery when SpongeBob sings the Krusty Krab pizza song. His voice has this warm, joyful quality that perfectly matches his optimistic personality. Then something changed. After the SpongeBob SquarePants movie was released in 2004, Steven Hillenburg stepped down as showrunner. He wanted the movie to serve as a series finale, a perfect conclusion to SpongeBob's story. But Nickelodeon had other plans. The show was too successful to end. When season 4 began, fans immediately noticed something was different. It wasn't just the writing or the animation that had changed. SpongeBob himself sounded different. Listen to SpongeBob's voice in Fear of a Krabby Patty, the very first episode after the movie, and compare it to something like Sleepy Time from season 1. The difference is subtle but unmistakable. The voice was still high-pitched, maybe even more so, but it had a different quality to it. What fans were hearing was the beginning of Tom Kenny's transition to a more falsetto-based approach to the character. Here's what was happening technically. Kenny's natural voice was beginning to deepen slightly with age, as happens with everyone. To maintain SpongeBob's characteristic high pitch, he started relying more heavily on falsetto techniques. But falsetto has a different resonance than a natural high voice. It's thinner, more strained, and lacks some of the warm undertones overtones of Kenny's original approach. Fan forums from this era are filled with discussions about the voice change. Some described it as SpongeBob sounding more artificial, or higher, but also deeper at the same time. What they were identifying was the shift from natural high pitch to falsetto technique. You can really hear this if you compare SpongeBob's laugh in the Graveyard Shift from season 2, where it sounds completely natural and unforced, to his laugh in later episodes where it has that slightly strained falsetto quality. The production environment had changed too. Andrea Romano took over as the voice director starting in season 4, replacing the hands-on direction that Hillenburg and Dryman had provided. New leadership often means new interpretations of how characters should sound, and that may have influenced Kenny's approach to the role. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Tom Kenny is getting older. When SpongeBob premiered, Kenny was 37. Now he's 62 years old. That's 25 years of performing one of the most vocally demanding characters in animation. To put that in perspective, Kenny has been voicing SpongeBob for longer than some of his fans have been alive. Vocal aging is a real phenomenon that affects everyone, including voice actors. As we get older, our vocal cords naturally change. They become less flexible, lose some of their elasticity, and maintaining extreme vocal ranges becomes more physically demanding. Think of it like an athlete. A tennis player at 37 moves differently than the same player at 62, even if they're still incredibly skilled. For Kenny, this has meant that creating SpongeBob's high-pitched voice requires significantly more effort than it used to. What once came naturally now requires conscious technique and physical strain. Voice actors often describe extreme characters' voices as living in your throat, and after 25 years, that kind of vocal resonance takes its toll. Recent fans have noticed what they described as a drier quality to SpongeBob's voice in newer episodes. Some describe it as sounding more forced or strained, though this is just an observation of how the voice has evolved. Compare SpongeBob's excited "I'm ready" from the very first episode to the same phrase in recent seasons, and you'll hear the difference. The enthusiasm is still there, but the vocal quality has that slightly more effortful sound. Kenny has had to adapt his technique to work with his changing voice while still maintaining the essence of the character that fans love. The physical toll of voice acting is something that's very rarely discussed publicly, but it's very real. Many voice actors develop vocal problems later in their careers from repeatedly performing extreme voices. Kenny performs multiple characters on SpongeBob. Not just the title character, but also Gary the Snail, the French narrator, SpongeBob's father Harold, and Patchy the Pirate in live-action segments. Maintaining all these different voices for decades is genuinely impressive from a technical standpoint. There's also something to be said about muscle memory and vocal habits. After 25 years, Kenny's vocal cords have essentially been trained to perform SpongeBob's voice in a specific way. Even as his natural voice is aged, those muscle patterns remain. However, to achieve the same pitch and tone, he has to work harder and rely more heavily on techniques like breath support and falsetto positioning. Interestingly, Kenny has mentioned in interviews that he often gets requests from fans to record personal voice messages as SpongeBob. He's joked that these custom SpongeBob messages might be more common than factory default voicemails at this point. But even these brief vocal recordings require significant vocal preparation and technique. It's not just Kenny's voice that changed over the years. The entire production environment has evolved dramatically. Early episodes had that warm analog sound that fans associate with classic SpongeBob, while modern digital recording is cleaner but arguably less charming. The show's approach to character development has also shifted significantly. Early SpongeBob was optimistic and enthusiastic, but he was also relatively grounded in his own cartoon reality. Think about Rock Bottom. Even in that bizarre situation, SpongeBob's reactions felt genuine and relatable. Modern SpongeBob is more hyperactive, more exaggerated, and often pushes into almost manic territory. Compare that to episodes like Pet Sitter Pat or Ink Lemonade, where SpongeBob's energy levels are cranked up to 11. This evolution in character personality requires a correspondingly more extreme vocal performance. Kenny has had to adjust his voice to match this shift, making SpongeBob sound more energetic and childlike than in the original seasons. There's also the matter of the show's global reach and cultural impact. SpongeBob SquarePants is now a worldwide phenomenon, airing in dozens of countries and generating billions in revenue. With that kind of success comes pressure to make the character as universally appealing as possible. This might influence how Kenny approaches the voice, making it broader and more immediately recognizable to international audiences who might be watching dubbed versions. Kenny himself has revealed some fascinating details about the business side of voice acting. Union contracts typically pay voice actors for up to 3 characters per session, which explains why Kenny voices so many different characters on the show. It's economically efficient and showcases his incredible range. The scheduling has remained remarkably consistent though. Wednesday has been recording day since 1999, and Kenny has mentioned how much he values this routine. It takes about 4 hours to record an 11-minute episode, and the cast still tries to record together in the same room whenever possible, maintaining that old radio show style that Hillenburg originally envisioned. But even the studio environment has changed. The original Nickelodeon studio setup was different than modern recording facilities. Different microphone setups, different mixing boards. All of these factors contribute to how a voice ultimately sounds in the final product. Despite all of these changes, Tom Kenny continues to embrace the role of SpongeBob with enthusiasm. In recent interviews, he said that he and his fellow voice actor Bill Fagerback wouldn't trade jobs with the biggest movie stars in the world. The SpongeBob franchise keeps evolving. There are new movies, spin-off shows like Camp Coral and The Patrick Star Show, and even special broadcasts like the Super Bowl on Nickelodeon, where Kenny performed as SpongeBob in real time. Remember when SpongeBob and Patrick provided live commentary during Super Bowl 58? Kenny had to improvise as SpongeBob for hours, showing that even at 62, he can still bring that character to life spontaneously. Kenny has proven remarkably adaptable. He's found ways to maintain SpongeBob's essential character while working within the limitations of his changing voice. The laugh is still there, the enthusiasm is still there, and most importantly, the heart of the character remains intact. But this does raise questions about the future. Kenny is 62, and while he shows no signs of slowing down, voice acting is a physically demanding profession. At some point, Nickelodeon will have to consider what happens if Kenny can no longer perform the role. Finding a replacement for such an iconic voice would be incredibly challenging. For now, though, Kenny seems committed to continuing the role. The franchise keeps expanding, giving him new ways to explore the character. Whether it's a Broadway musical, a new movie, or just the regular series, SpongeBob continues to evolve, and Kenny evolves with him. So why doesn't SpongeBob sound like he used to? It's because of natural evolution of one man's voice over 25 years, combined with changes in production techniques, creative direction, and the character himself. Tom Kenny is SpongeBob SquarePants. His voice has been the constant thread connecting the naive Sponge from Help Wanted to the hyperactive character we see today. Yes, the voice has changed, but it's changed along with Kenny himself, along with the show's production, and along with our culture's relationship with this beloved character. Whether he's delivering his classic "I'm ready" or screaming "my leg" as Fred the Fish, Kenny's vocal versatility has been the heart of Bikini Bottom for over 2 decades. The real question isn't whether SpongeBob sounds different. Of course he does. The question is whether we're ready for the day when Tom Kenny might have to pass the spatula to someone else. Until then, we can appreciate the incredible dedication of a voice actor who has spent over 2 decades bringing joy to millions of fans worldwide. One "I'm ready" at a time. And honestly, even if SpongeBob sounds a little different now, he's still the same optimistic, enthusiastic character we all fell in love with all those years ago. Sometimes change is about growing into something new while keeping what made you special in the first place. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.